Mabrica, welcome to this new episode of Let's Talk Taíno. I'm your host Priscilla Colon, co-founder and creative here at Casarito, where our mission is to promote the Taíno language and culture. So today's episode is going to be about the power of language. We're going to talk about the latest research, including MRIs, that tell us how powerful language truly is and how that all relates to Taíno. Now, we all know that language is a powerful tool that we can use to communicate our ideas, our thoughts, and our values. But did you know that scientists have discovered that language shapes the way that you think? And that language can even change your thoughts without you meaning to? So let's dive right in. In an experiment, scientists asked speakers of different languages to describe regular objects. Spanish speakers, when they saw a bridge, used words such as strong and long. On the other hand, German speakers used words such as beautiful and elegant to describe that same bridge. So why did they use different words? Well, in Spanish, the word for bridge is el puente. That is a masculine word. In German, the word for bridge is Brücke, which is a feminine word. So the language that they spoke subconsciously influenced the way that they described this regular object. Spanish speakers described it as more quote-unquote masculine, and German speakers described it more as quote-unquote feminine. So language is influencing us in a subconscious level that we don't even realize. So in addition to these experiments, scientists have also mapped brain activity when we are listening and or speaking. They found that the listener's brainwaves began matching the speaker's brainwaves on the MRI machines. But what if you're not listening to an inspirational speech? What if your hearing is someone saying that you are wrong, you are bad, and that you do not exist? And that, unfortunately, is what happened to our Taíno ancestors. So due to colonization, new languages were imposed on our Taíno ancestors: Spanish, French, English, and others. Our words were called gibberish, and our words started to be used against us. So we began to buy into these negative ideas about ourselves. So let's take a look at a few examples of how this happened. So in an earlier video, we talked about the real translations of Taíno and Ni Taíno. We know that the Spanish mistranslated the word Ni Taíno to mean nobleman. So using language, they imposed a new social structure. This was not at all how Taíno society was structured. And we can see that when we compare the translations of that same word or a similar word with our Arawakan sister languages. I came across this wonderful TED Talk by this Menominee speaker. He is part of a tribe here in the northern part of the US near the Wisconsin area. They have a specific word that I'm going to try to pronounce for you today. It's called Nitanu e Makanuk. And that is a word that means my relatives. And it actually refers to all human beings. We are all part of the human family. And so you can see that this feeling of kinship and being related to each other and treating people as if they were your own flesh and blood was something that was widespread in Native American communities. It was not the same in Europe. So we can see how language can be used to impose a different social structure. But how about gender norms? Well, we know what happens there, but let's take a look at a few examples. We know that European languages, such as Spanish, have gendered nouns. That means that everything is either male or female. But we know that in Taíno, there were no gendered nouns. Nothing was just male or just female. And that gender equality in the language also expresses an important value in their culture. Let's take a look at a few examples and see what happens. Yaya refers to the Great Spirit. In Spanish, you'll notice that something happens. It is translated as El Gran Espíritu. It acquires a masculine noun. In English, it's not so bad because it doesn't have gender. But let's take a look at The next word. Cacique we've spoken about before, and cacique in English is probably going to be translated as chief first. The chiefess, feminine version of that, is an afterthought. Guess what happens in Spanish? This term came from the Taíno, but it became a masculine noun. They also had a female version of it, la cacica, but again, that is an afterthought. That is not what comes to mind first. Let's look at the last word, bohique, sometimes called bejique. In English, we know that it's a healer, shaman, or spiritual leader. In Spanish, they made it into a masculine noun, el bohique or el bejique. So if you were a Spanish speaker who learned these terms in Spanish, you would assume that yaya, cacique, and bohique always referred to men. And we know that's not true. Unfortunately, another thing that happened with language is that even though Taínos continued speaking Taíno, that language, our words, were called gibberish. And slowly but surely, we were forced to stop using those words. Let's take a look at a few examples. We learned a few videos ago that haba is a type of basket, a hanging basket. Haba has fallen out of use because it's no longer valued. In Taíno, the word DÍTA means bowl. Again, DÍTA has fallen out of use because it's not the norm. In Boriquen, there's a word used to mean a faraway place, and that is hurutungo. So every time a word is used in Taíno, you would hear things like, that's not a real word, that's just gibberish, you're just making it up, or that's the way country folk say it, that's not real. So what happens when you stop using these words? This is an example of a DÍTA that is at the Smithsonian Museum. It is a beautiful work of art. You can see the great care taken in all of these scroll patterns or carvings on this DÍTA. It is usually made from a higuera or higuera, and that is a calabash tree. From the dried husk of the calabash, you could create many things. Bowls and plates and spoons. You can create bottles for holding water. You can create a variety of musical instruments, including the guiro, which we'll talk about in other videos. So what you're losing when you lose this word is the entire process of artistry, craftsmanship, and your values as well. So at this point, you might be saying, it can't get any worse, right? Unfortunately, it did. Our very language was used against us, and we started believing all those negative ideas about ourselves. So there is a term that is used to mean country bumpkin, somebody who's uneducated, and the term is jíbaro or jíbara. But have you ever stopped to think why jíbaro and jíbara are a negative term? Let's take a look at the word parts. You may be very surprised to find out what it means. So, jíbaro is made up of two word parts, jiba and ro. Jiba means forest. Iro is man. So what you're literally saying when you say jíbaro is man of the forest. Let's take a look at jíbara. Again, this is made up of two parts. Jiba means forest and ara means people. So literally, jíbara could mean people of the forest. Who lived in the forest away from the Europeans? It was our Taíno ancestors. They fled to the mountains and the forest. So can you imagine taking the term jíbaro or jíbara, turning it into something negative, something that you don't want to be, and then having us use that same word to denigrate each other? That is an atrocity. And many of us have started believing that. We say things like, don't speak like that, only a jíbaro says that. But in most cases, those quote-unquote jíbaros, those people of the forest, are speaking our own traditional Taíno words. I think we should start reclaiming these terms, jíbaro and jíbara, and use them to mean something positive, which is what they originally meant. So how can we start decolonizing our thoughts? One, we can stop assuming that Eurocentrism is the norm. Everything from our language to societal structures to gender norms to body image, all of that, we have to deconstruct and say, wait a second, where are these thoughts coming from? The other thing we need to do is start asking why. Become curious about why is it that we say the things that we say and how we say them. Is there a reason we always put males before females? Is there a reason we think jíbaro and jíbara are negative terms? And that is the way that we're going to start peeling back that colonial perspective that was imposed on us. And we're going to start getting to the heart of who we truly were and who we truly are today. So, while we were tackling this very important subject, we also reviewed some Taíno words we'd learned in the past, and we learned some new ones. So let's take a look at those now. Yaya, Great Spirit. Cacique, Chief or Chiefess. Bohique or Behique, Shaman, Spiritual Leader or Healer. Jaba, Basket. DÍTA, Bowl. Higuera or Higuera, Calabash Tree or the crockery made from this tree. Jurutungo, Faraway Place. Jíbaro, Man of the Forest. Jíbara, People of the Forest. Thank you again for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that I got you thinking about some things, asking why. I think that is the most important thing as we continue studying language and the culture of our Taíno people. Join us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we can continue this conversation and build our community. Also, make sure that you continue subscribing, set your notifications because there are a lot of fun community building activities on the way. In the meantime, Tay Karaya Guaitiao Nagu.